In the cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean, how did this breathtaking chase between two deadly hunters come to an end? In this underwater battle between the United States destroyer ship and German submarine U-571, how did the commander's final decision determine the fate of his crew? If you also have stories related to naval service, you can send them to our email address found in the description.
On that cold morning in May, I stood in the conning tower of U-571 in the deep waters of the Atlantic. I was 42 years old, having served on submarines for 17 years. My hair had turned gray early. My face bore the lines that the sea had given me. I was of medium height, my body solid with the muscles I had gained during my years at sea. My eyes were dark blue, just like the North Sea that had raised me. I was born in Hamburg, and the sea was my home. That morning, looking through the periscope, I noticed a shadow on the horizon. The American destroyer, USS Morrison, had crossed our route. I descended to the command center, my crew of 37 men waiting at their posts. Hans Weber was my most trusted second in command. He was 35 years old, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, a sailor from Bremen. He had been with me since the beginning of the war. "Commander, the destroyer may have spotted us," Hans said, worry in his voice. I looked at my crew. The youngest was 18-year-old Klaus. The oldest was 14-9-year-old engine chief Friedrich. They were all my responsibility. These young men had mothers, fathers, wives, children waiting for them at home. Friedrich had 3 children in Hamburg, while Klaus had a young fiancée in Munich. "Deep dive," I ordered. 150 meters depth. The submarine slowly submerged into the water. Our steel hull began to creak under the water pressure. This sound was what submariners feared most, but we were used to it. U-571 was one of Germany's most advanced submarines. It was 87 meters long, with a crew of 49 men. We had 6 torpedoes in our torpedo tubes. The destroyer's propeller sound was approaching. Underwater, this sound was the footsteps of death. Our sonar operator Kurt put on his headphones and began listening. He was 26 years old, thin-built, a young man with brown hair. His hands were trembling, but his eyes were determined. "Commander, the destroyer is coming, directly toward us. Distance, 1,500 meters. At that moment I thought. My wife Greta was waiting for me in Hamburg. We couldn't celebrate the 10th anniversary of our marriage because the war had started. My daughter Ingrid was only 7 years old, missing me at school. In her last letter, she had sent me a picture she had drawn. These were the drawings of a little girl whose father was a submarine commander. A sun drawn with yellow crayon, a sea drawn with blue crayon, and a small submarine in the middle. Below it, she had written with her tiny hands, "My daddy's house." I remembered the day I was appointed commander of U-571, my first meeting with the crew. At the Hamburg shipyard, they had lined up beside the submarine. The youngest, Klaus, was clutching his military cap tightly. His hands were trembling, but there was determination in his eyes. He came from Munich. His family was involved in farming. This young man who had never seen the sea was now with me in the depths of the Atlantic. Friedrich, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. He was born in Hamburg. His father had also been a sailor. In World War I, his father had been lost in the Battle of Jutland. Friedrich had become a sailor, following in his father's footsteps. He had 3 sons, 16-year-old Heinrich, 14-year-old Wilhelm, and 12-year-old Ernst. All 3 children were watching for the day their father would return. Hans Weber was my closest friend. We had finished naval school together in Bremen. Back then, as young officers, we hadn't thought we would fight together in the future. Hans's mother was 65 years old. He was her only child. His father had died at an early age. Hans was his mother's only support. In every letter, he asked about his mother's condition. "Commander, the destroyer has stopped. It's beginning sonar search," Kurt said. Silence. In submarines, the most critical moments were exactly these moments of silence. My crew held their breath. We only heard the submarine's own sounds, the hum of electric motors, the operation of the ventilation system, the sounds the steel hull made under water pressure. The destroyer's sonar waves hit U-571. A metallic ringing sound was heard. We were caught. This sound meant the sound of the death bell in submarines. The sonar waves were reporting our exact location to the American ship. I looked at the faces of my crew. There was fear, but no panic. These men had been with me for months. In the stormy nights of the Atlantic, in the searches of enemy ships, we had always remained like a family. U-571 was not just the place where we worked. It was our home, where we ate, slept, and dreamed. "Stop all engines," I whispered the order. The submarine came to a complete stop. Now it was like a steel coffin, suspended in the middle of the sea. My crew looked at me. There was not fear in their eyes, but trust. With the experience that 17 years of being a sailor had given me, I tried to give them confidence. As the destroyer circled above, the intensity of the propeller sound increased and decreased. The American ship was searching for us, but couldn't pinpoint our exact location. This was our chance. Suddenly, an underwater sound of metals clashing was heard. The first depth charge had been dropped from the destroyer. The bomb exploded about 200 meters away from U-571. The submarine shook violently. The ceiling lights went out. Emergency lights came on. Under the red light, my crew's faces looked like ghosts. "Damage report," I said to Hans. "Commander, we're not taking on water. All systems are functioning." The second bomb fell closer. This time a cracking sound came from the rear section of the submarine. Friedrich came running from the engine room. This experienced 49-year-old machinist had his face covered with sweat. His hands were covered in oil. His overalls had engine oil stains. "Commander, there's a small leak in the rear compartment. It's under control, but the water level is rising," he said breathlessly. "The pumps are working, but the water intake rate is increasing." At that moment, another cracking sound was heard in the submarine's metal hull. This sound showed that the steel was getting tired, that the pressure was now forcing bearable limits. At 150 meters depth, every second could be U-571's grave. Kurt, the sonar operator, removed his headphones. His face had turned pale. "Commander, the destroyer is right above us. Other ships are also approaching. From the sound signals I understand, there are at least 2 more ships. This meant we would fight alone against 3 American ships. Our chances had diminished even more. But I couldn't show this to my crew. A commander's most important duty was to keep his crew's morale high. I made my decision. We would surface and fight. There would be a fair battle between us and the destroyer. But I knew that U-571's chances were slim. The destroyer's guns would be more effective than our torpedoes. Surfacing, I told my crew. Battle stations. The submarine slowly began to rise. It took 3 minutes to rise from 150 meters to the surface. These 3 minutes were the longest 3 minutes of my life. I thought about each member of my crew: Klaus's fiancée in Munich, Friedrich's 3 children in Hamburg, Hans's elderly mother in Bremen. When we surfaced, the sun blinded my eyes. The blue waters of the Atlantic looked calm on that beautiful May morning, but this was deceptive calm. The destroyer, USS Morrison, was 500 meters away from us. I could see sailors running around on the deck of the American ship. They were also young men like us. They also had loved ones waiting for them at home. The destroyer's commander was an experienced soldier. I could tell from his movements. The ship had taken a tactical position, its guns turned toward us. This was one of the best ships of the United States Navy. Its speed was greater than ours. Its firepower was stronger. The American ship immediately opened fire. The first artillery shell fell in front of U-571. A water column rose to the sky. Cold Atlantic water splashed on our faces. The second shell came closer. The American gunners were adjusting the range. "Torpedo ready," shouted our torpedo officer. I was watching the American ship through the periscope. I could see American sailors running on the destroyer's deck. They were also fighting for their homeland, just like us. They also had families waiting for them at home. "Fire torpedo," I ordered. The torpedo left U-571's forward tube and submerged into the water. It would take 45 seconds to reach its target. During these 45 seconds, the destroyer fired continuously. Shells were falling around U-571. Suddenly there was a violent explosion. Our torpedo had hit the side of the destroyer. Flames rose from the middle of the American ship, but the destroyer was still standing and continued to fire. Meanwhile, a shell fired from the destroyer hit U-571's conning tower. I fell with the shock in the conning tower. I was wounded in my left arm. Blood was flowing, but there was no fracture in the bone. Hans ran to me, worry on his face. "Commander, you're wounded. Let us bandage it. It's not a problem. Continue the battle," I said. But the pain was unbearable. At that moment I saw my crew running on U-571's deck. Klaus, the 18-year-old young sailor, was continuing his duty despite his fear. He was helping with torpedo preparation procedures. His hands were trembling, but there was determination on his face. The courage of this young man impressed me. The destroyer continued to approach. The American ship's commander was applying a clever tactic. By shortening the distance, he was trying to reduce the effectiveness of our torpedoes. At close range, artillery fire would be more effective, but I knew that U-571 had taken too much damage. The submarine's bow had tilted to the right. We had started taking on water. My crew continued their duties without panicking. This was a sign of German naval discipline. The destroyer was approaching. The American ship had also taken damage, but was in better condition than us. I gave my final order to my crew: prepare to abandon ship. This order is the most difficult order for a commander. Abandoning your ship is like abandoning your own child. But my crew's life was more valuable than the ship. My crew began implementing emergency procedures. Life jackets were put on. Emergency boats were prepared. Klaus was crying, while Friedrich calmly made his final checks. U-571 slowly began to sink. I surveyed my surroundings one last time in the conning tower. These were the final moments of my submarine that I had served for 17 years. I knew every corner, every screw. This metal hull was my second home. The destroyer USS Morrison was coming toward us, but it wasn't firing. The American commander hadn't found it honorable to fire at a sinking submarine. This was a sign of naval honor. Even in war, there were some rules, some principles of honor. I saw my crew jumping into the water. With life jackets, they began swimming in the cold waters of the Atlantic. Klaus, despite not knowing how to swim, had jumped into the water trusting his life jacket. Friedrich, on the other hand, had stayed in the engine room until the last moment, safely shutting down all systems. I saluted my submarine one last time in U-571's conning tower. "Auf Wiedersehen, mein Schiff," I said. "Farewell, my ship." Then I too jumped into the water. 31 men from my crew were rescued. We lost 6 of our men. Klaus and Friedrich were among those rescued. The United States sailors pulled us from the water and took us prisoner. During the prisoner of war camp years I spent in America, I always thought about U-571. That submarine wasn't just a war machine, it was the home of 37 people. When I returned to Hamburg after the war ended, Greta and Ingrid were waiting for me. My daughter had now turned 12 years old.
This story that took place in the depths of the Atlantic shows that war was not only between countries, but also between people. Both German and American sailors had risked their lives for their homelands. This story reminds us that courage, honor, and humanity know no boundaries. Those minutes spent beneath the sea reveal a commander's responsibility to his crew and the true face of war. Perhaps the real victory lay in meeting even your enemy with honor.